Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second installment of our Empowering Resilient Severe Weather webinar series. Today's event is focused on hurricanes. My name is Hannah, and I'm a marketing manager in the public safety sector here at Everbridge, and I'll be moderating this session. All webinars are recorded so that you can revisit, share with a colleague, or catch up at any time. A link with an access to the recording of this session will be sent in the next week, and you can also find the webinar recording in our resources section of the website. If you have any questions, either during or after the webinar, you're welcome to email me at hannah.meeks@everbridge.com. This entire series is focused on communication and collaboration during severe weather events. But remember that this information can be used in many other types of incidents as well. For today's event, we have a panel to discuss preparing for and responding to hurricanes from an emergency management perspective. Please ask questions throughout the discussion by typing them into the question pane located in the control panel. We'll answer as many questions as time permits at the end of the session. With that, I'm happy to introduce our panelists, Sally Wade and David McIntyre, as well as our moderator, Kate Dean. Sally is the Director of Emergency Management for Martin County Fire Rescue in Florida, and David is the Deputy Director of Emergency Management for Brunswick County, North Carolina. They're joined by Everbridge employee Kate Dean, who is the Technical Account Manager and Public Safety Lead with a background in Florida Emergency Management. With that, Kate, please take it away.
Thanks, Hannah. Good afternoon, everybody. Like Hannah said, my name is Kate Dean. I'm a technical account manager and public safety lead here at Everbridge. I primarily support our Alert Florida users, as well as helping a lot of our other teams with our public safety focus here at Everbridge. Before we get started, Sally, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, like Hannah said, I'm Sally Wade. I'm the Director of Martin County Emergency Management. I've been in emergency management for over 20 years. I've only been a director for the last 3, so some things are new to me in that realm of being a director. But I've surely have had tons of experience with hurricanes. I recently deployed for Hurricane Ian on the West Coast for a few weeks as the mass care director and mass feeding. And I've also been to Hurricane Irene in Albany, New York, where I was the logistics section chief. So I've had a few deployments under my belt and definitely tons of emergency management. I was a shelter manager in Palm Beach County for many years, so very familiar with all the aspects of what a hurricane can bring and how to prepare, respond, and how to recovery, which has definitely been a big focus since Hurricane Ian.
Those have been some pretty impactful 3 years, Sally. So I think like the weight of those 3 years certainly is important to acknowledge.
Not to mention COVID. So we always got to throw that.
Yeah, just that little thing. David, you want to give us a little background?
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this panel today. And for those out there, my name's David McIntyre. I'm the Deputy Director of Emergency Management for Brunswick County, North Carolina. Historically, I actually was born and raised in Florida, came up with a little over 28 and a half years in the fire service, 8 years, the last 8 years being the emergency manager rather for the city of Gainesville there in North Central Florida. And even though back then I wasn't on the coast, we dealt with more of the inland features and host situations along with the county. That transitioned whenever I moved to North Carolina, and now we're the southeasternmost county on the coast of North Carolina, tucked in between Wilmington and Myrtle Beach, with an odd feature of all our beaches facing south. So we've got a long history of hurricanes up here, some pretty significant, with the latest or the biggest one of recent being Florence. As far as experience, a couple deployments there in the state of Florida, the biggest one being EOC support during Hurricane Michael out in Gadsden County. So that was always eventful. But when you're in Inland County in a college town, you also get features outside of hurricanes. So a lot of experience in emergency management in that short 8 years. I say short years, 8 short years because they passed really fast. So, but thanks again for the opportunity.
Perfect. Well, thank you both for joining me. It's always fun to have familiar faces during this. And I think the people that have joined us today and that will be watching this video in the future will really benefit from your guys' vast experience in emergency management, in particularly pertaining to hurricanes. So to get started, it is June 20th. We are 20 days into the 2023 hurricane season. What would you say are the most important tactics for mitigating hurricane threats before they occur? So last couple months, the beginning of June, what have you guys been doing to kind of mitigate hurricanes, both with your community and, to prepare your EOC partners? Sally, you want to get started?
Sure. I think that mitigating hurricane threats before they incur involve a combination of preparedness measures and proactive strategies. So I'd say a couple of those are developing and maintaining relationships with your meteorology, monitoring systems. I know we've been doing a lot of training on that as well, keeping up with some new updated, HURRAVAC, things that we use to track storms. Public awareness and education, that's, so critical. We do tons of public outreach all the time, as much as we can. So many people that live in Florida now are new to Florida and may have never experienced storms before. So we are definitely finding that out. I think that, getting out your emergency response plans, making sure everything is updated and current, and, you're touching your partners and you're having conversations, and you're just really getting into the whole hurricane season mode. And, you're planning all year just for these few months, or, 6 months of hurricane activity. So.
David?
So, yeah, I'd have to agree with everything that Sally mentioned. The importance of awareness, and I break it down into really 3 areas. It's awareness, education, and communication. Those three goal areas are very important in our tactics here in North Carolina. We just actually went through a complete EOP rewrite this year. Our previous one prior to me being here, just for the crowd. I've actually only been in North Carolina for about 1.5 years now, so playing catch up a little bit, learning the North Carolina way. So but the pieces stay solid and important no matter where you're at. The ability to recognize your threats and what your risks are to your community across the board. But and the other 2 are, I think, at the top of the list. Education. You got to educate yourself, before we can educate our community. But it is so vital for us, and it's really vital in a community like we have, and I'm sure it's very similar down in South Florida, with the fact that our population changes this time of year due to tourism, and every Saturday we get a new bunch. Checkout day by 11 on Saturday, check in 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So that same day, so you get a new batch coming in. So you got to be able to educate not only those folks coming in, but our realtors, our mortgage, or not our mortgage companies, but our folks that are renting out Airbnbs and so forth. But to get that education out to everybody, because some, like, people moving to the county, those people coming to visit may never have, witnessed or experienced a hurricane or anything close to it. But then communication is at the very top, as it normally is in areas like this, because you got to share information. If you don't share that information, it's doing no good sitting on somebody's desk. So those are the 3 areas I concentrate on, no matter where I'm at. When I was in Florida, that was the case, and here in North Carolina, alike.
Perfect. So I know you guys are always monitoring what's going on in the Atlantic. We've got little tropical storm out there now. We're not going to talk about it, but got something out there now. When your county is going to be impacted by a storm, what are the first action steps you take when that tropical storm watch is issued?
You know, I think exactly what kind of, we do what we tell the public. You know, we try to practice what we preach. We stay informed. We, you know, again, constantly monitoring our weather service and just having communications with them. I've been on the phone 3 times today with our National Weather Service, you know, Melbourne folks. So just, you know, really keeping that up. We've, even with my staff today, we've gone through our steps to take our action plans. We actually base we have a timeline that we base on tropical impact winds, you know, coming into the county. So we're already kind of going through a checklist, even though, you know, this storm doesn't really look like it's going to have an impact on us. But it's a really good practice run in the beginning of the season, just to, you know, as we go through our steps, we actually update them. Hey, we forgot this, or, I mean, that's a constant, because, you know, we always learn from lessons all the time. So I think that we've been looking at our vendors, making sure all of our contracts are current, making sure we are stocking up on all of our emergency supplies, just like we tell the public to do. You know, we're making sure our caterers ready, our contracts. You know, this morning we had a conversation with our school board just to make sure that, you know, there's no construction going on in any of our shelters, you know, just little things that you don't usually think about. Of course, you know, and we've already talked to some of our other directors throughout the county. You know, they already have a plan in the beginning of hurricane season to, you know, have shutters available for our buildings, and, you know, just really just doing what we, you know, practicing what we preach, getting ready. You know, I like to say it's not like getting ready should always be ready, you know, but just, you know, making sure that we checked road closures this morning too for our evacuation routes. We've had a lot of construction on 995, and, you know, just some things that you wouldn't really think about, or that we're checking off on our list already. So, and those things change every day.
Right. And I would assume that some things the things that you're touching on are sometimes different in the beginning of hurricane season in June rather than in October. You know, like you mentioned, your school district, like right now, school is out in Florida, but in October, it certainly isn't. But
there's a
you
lot
had
of
to check
construction
on
at our schools right
yeah,
now. So
that's a good point.
now that they're closed, they're redoing parking lots and just things like that we have to consider.
Right. That's a good point.
Well, up here and historically, we're very similar in the fact that we have, you know, checkoff lists based on what we're doing at certain time frames. As the storm approaches or even is threatening, you know, we're, in this case, as warnings or watches are being delivered, you know, you're in that 36, 48 hour, depending on which one's coming out. And, you know, so we're making sure all our executive orders are in place. We're communicating really strongly with our partners to make sure that all the plans are being, you know, opened up and are in place and being activated. We're communicating with the public early on, because being a coastal community is, as we all know, it takes time with the evacuations, especially in our case, we're very limited with our evacuation routes. It could take us 36, 48 hours or better to get everybody off the island once the order is issued. So we're, you know, coordinating with our municipalities that control the barrier islands to ensure that that information is being shared. We're, you know, working with them to ensure that we have what their goals are and their plans are when they're going to pull that measure and get evacuation started. We're making sure that all our, you know, staff assignments and logistical plans are in place and activated, and ensure that we don't have any unmet needs. And I mean, just for example, and you mentioned making sure your schools are up and running. If we had an incident that was to impact Brunswick County today, we'd be battling up against one of our primary shelters for special needs. is being used this week for an incident command post by the Forestry Service for a 16,000 acre brush fire. So that would be always a concern. So we're making sure we're getting out there, communicating early, and making sure that everybody's on their toes, thinking and communicating with their paired people who they're responsible to communicate with.
Perfect. And speaking of communication, I know that the demographics for Southeast Florida and coastal North Carolina can be a little bit different. How do you ensure your methods of communication are equitable and accessible for all members of your community? Those permanent residents, maybe residents that are only here for part of the year, and your visiting community.
Sally, I'll take this one first.
Okay.
Just give you a break there. Our messaging methodology is very, I say simple, but there's a lot of pieces to it. We multi-source our messaging as far as not just our mass notification system, as we either Everbridge, like we're moving to Everbridge, and but we're utilizing that and the features that are embedded within mass notification systems. We're pulling in the subject matter experts to make sure that we're really messaging in the right tone, because it's sometimes a message, we get it on a text message or an email, there's no urgency outside of maybe just a couple words. So we're phrasing those messages in a sense that we can get our urgency across to those that we're trying to make contact with. And then we're utilizing other vendors in the sense of sign language and other means to get those messages to those that may have accessibility issues. But we're doing, that's part of our early in the year preparation actions, as well as to reach out to those communities and those pieces of the communities that are underserved or underprivileged, and those that have challenges and with accessibility, and ensuring that we touch base with them. We're making that contact early, so if we need to adjust our communications plan, we can do that to make sure we're messaging in the right means and not leaving anybody out. And that gives us the opportunity to make sure that our messages are equitable and accessible.
Yeah, I completely agree. We use Alert Martin for so many of our notifications, but not only notifications to the public, but but using Everbridge to our employees is just critical. We just did a welcome to the beginning of hurricane season, so our employees actually work in our shelters and our points of distributions. Then they work throughout our hurricane activities. So we not only need to make sure that our community is notified, but just to make sure that our employees are ready to go and notified, so they're ready to respond, they're ready to prepare their homes. And I really think that getting that message out to them is critical as well. But the diverse populations in our community, by using social media and different radio channels and text messages and all of those things that we can get, employing those diverse platforms, I think we can accommodate all the different preferences and accessibility requirements. I think we do a good job at that. We hope that we're getting the right message out all the time. We may or may not be, but we can only just keep trying. So I think we use the notifications that we get out. I think just like the ASL interpreters, we use ESL interpreters for our press releases. We have a Spanish line. We just keep getting new innovative ideas, every year. So
I know you guys use your Alert Martin keyword pretty heavily during countywide, impacts, things like that. And you work pretty closely with your PIO, your comms team, to kind of utilize and push that keyword, right?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Our communications team mostly works with the public, and we mostly work with our stakeholders and partner agencies and employees. But yes, we definitely are drafting the public messages out with our communications team, which is a great coordination that we have. And pushing out that Alert Martin number. And
yeah, you guys have a lot of opt-ins for your Alert Martin keyword. I think it's one of those important use cases to point out, especially because keywords can be so versatile when it comes to getting those opt-ins for like your visiting community. When there's a major hurricane, a lot of times people are opting in to the keywords where their parents live, things like that. So that way they can get those updates without creating an entire profile, stuff like that can be really helpful.
Yes.
I know that you have also used Everbridge for your special needs communication to that vulnerable population.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about that a little bit too?
Yeah, we actually just, if we see something that's out there, we'll send a notification, just kind of giving those clients a heads up that, they may, they need to get prepared for a possible, shelter opening. And then they'll actually get a second notification that we are activating shelters. And then that trickles all the way down to a phone call. So we're kind of fortunate that, our population is at, 161,000. And I couldn't tell you what our special needs number is right now, 300-400. But we have the ability to have this special needs team to actually call them. But we couldn't, once we notify them and they say they're not coming, that's one less phone call we have to make. So the workload on us is, so much better by them saying, yes, they'd like to, go to the shelter, or no. And, in so many cases, if it's no, then, we only call the ones that say yes, because that's only makes sense. So yes, we definitely use it for our special needs population. And we do it for updating too, to update information.
Yeah, the polling functionality in Everbridge can be really useful for that. And I know you guys also use like the reporting functionalities too, in order to get those correct numbers to assess your workload and the transportation and all of that kind of stuff. It all kind of like works hand in hand.
Yes, for sure.
David, do you guys do anything particular for like your large visiting population on the coast down there during the summer?
One of the things that we're going, it's been used with our current mass notification system to a degree. With our move to Everbridge, our plan is in place that we're going to utilize the keywords and so that we can get that information out to those coming in, working with our partners, like I said, the ones that are the rental companies, the few hotels that we have closer to the beach. Our population, our coastal population is not real commercialized. It's very like a lot of normal beach houses and so forth. So we get a lot of those type renters. We don't see the big commercial hotels and so forth. So working with those partners is the way our plan is set up, the way it'll be initiated. And I did want to add one thing. We push out a lot of information. We try to gauge how we message, and we're hoping that we're getting it out in the right mean, by the right means. But our plan is to implement a true after action on every incident. So early on, as we figure out, and communications is always that big part, sitting at the top. So getting feedback from our community. Did they get the message? Was it interpreted in the right way? Was it helpful? And be able to come back to the table post storm when everything kind of calms down, and hopefully before another one decides to show up, but to be able to make those tweaks and improve our messaging.
Yeah, I will say when I was working in county emergency management, the reporting functionality in Everbridge and being able to kind of like write in incident notes and all that kind of stuff is so helpful for that after action, because you think you're going to be able to remember everything, when you called for the evacuation, when you sent that EOC activation notification, like all of that kind of information. And then you're like, oh yeah, I'll remember. And then you go, because I used to write our after actions, and then 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, when you're like trying to take a breath and you're like, okay, I should get started on this. And you're like, I don't even know what day it is today, let alone what day I sent that alert. And how many times, how many people did we reach? How many of our EOC partners were confirming? All of that kind of stuff can be, it's all saved in there. I noticed that a lot of our Florida users were using the incident notes feature during Hurricane Ian. After they would send an incident notification, they would use the notes feature to put in who authorized the evacuation notification. If there were any issues with like people receiving the alerts, or if someone sent an alert that they weren't supposed to, things like that, they were putting everything in the notes. It's all downloadable in your incident report. It's also, again, so helpful when you're doing your post after action meeting, saying like, this is what happened, and it's all time stamped, all like user stamped, all of that kind of stuff. So it can be really, really helpful. Speaking of notification systems, how would you say your notification system has made your community more resilient to hurricanes? Like Sally, you said earlier, we have so many people, so many new Florida residents in the last couple of years. So many of them have not been through hurricanes, are not familiar with how to respond to a hurricane. Have you seen a big jump in, your notification opt-ins or people wanting to be notified of hurricanes?
Absolutely. We use Alert Martin, which is an Everbridge product, and that really keeps our residents informed, so they're able to make decisions on protective actions that they may need to take. So when we're sending them out, maybe they're a little discouraged on every storm that's passing through. Not a tropical storm, just regular day-to-day showers. But one positive notification or feedback we get from that is we know when to take our umbrella out or not. But mostly I feel like when they get that tornado warning or they get that significant severe storm warnings, that they're staying inside and they're doing what they should be, maybe not getting in their car and driving, or with our hurricane updates, we've had so many more opt-ins because I believe it's because we're doing so much public outreach, and we're giving this number and we're giving out Alert Martin cards, and we're saying go in there and sign up for this, and this, and even just crime in your neighborhood. You get notified for, and I think that they become more resilient to what we're saying, that communications are open, and they're listening, especially for the new Floridians, because there just are so many. I just actually did a huge segment on one of the news channels, and we were just like looking at some stats from the new people in Florida, and it's just you can't get out there enough. You can't get out. There's not enough people to get out there and tell everybody. So definitely using a notification system and communications like that are going to be key.
Absolutely. I remember talking to some of the Palm Beach County emergency managers after Ian, and they do a monthly report on their opt-ins, and they saw, even though Hurricane Ian didn't impact Palm Beach County, they still saw a huge increase in opt-ins, just because there was, the storm was so big, so scary, so eye-opening for so many people that they were like, well, how do I get notified? So they were able to kind of increase that opt-in percentage, even in counties that weren't impacted. So I could only imagine how that impact was in counties that were.
Right. Our numbers always increase during the beginning of hurricane season, as well as our special needs numbers, and the hits to our social media. And we do also track that as well. So we can see the differences.
Yeah, I totally agree on everything both of you said, and I think to take that a little bit, maybe the next step, in the sense that I think to help the community be more resilient is how they receive that message. Is it the last thing we want to be is the kid crying wolf every time a storm comes up and over messaging and burning our community out. So I really stand on the fact that we want to message when it's when it's vital to it's public safety. that's our main goal, and to be able to message the community on a regular basis when it makes a difference. I'm not saying anything Sally said is incorrect, don't get me wrong, but the fact of being careful not to overload the community with messaging and to ensure those messages are concise and deliberate, and and get the message across so that the people, every time that alarm goes off and they look at their phones or recognize the number on caller ID, that they see Everbridge, Alert Martin, or Alert Brunswick, whatever it may be, that they're paying attention. It's like somebody wants me to know something important, and that's hits very hard on me, because I've been on the other side of that, when you just get bombarded with messages and you're like, okay, I'm tired of this, and you just that's just another message. But we don't want that to occur in our community, and I'm sure that's most of emergency managers are that way. We want our people to pay attention when we send these messages, because it could, it's life or death sometimes. So
I think that's always important to keep in mind. Jurisdictions where I've seen the most success when it comes to notifications and engaging their community is kind of having like a tiered notification process. Like you have your social media and your Nixle alerts. That's kind of like your FYI. You use your Everbridge notification system with all of your wireless and your landline data for emergencies, and then you use your iPods, your WIA, and your EAS for like your, hey, we need you to like drop everything and be paying attention kind of alert. So I think it is so important to not over notify. It's something that I talk to clients about all of the time. Like, we don't need you to send a phone call to 50,000 people that the parade has been canceled. Maybe just an Nixle alert will do fine for that. But there's a wildfire at your back door, yeah, send the WIA. So it's just kind of like understanding, what threshold it is for your community also, because it's not just, like you can be sending, posting on Twitter for all of your day-to-day stuff. If you have 2 followers, it's probably not going to go very far. But kind of like understanding how your community wants to be reached, what matters to them, things like that. For your other jurisdictions, for your colleagues, for your neighbors, do you have any suggestions for obtaining and keeping funding for your state and county officials if they don't see the value in a notification system?
Well, I would hope that they would see the value, but I definitely would suggest, having highlight some potential benefits, and, just showing all the good things and all the people that it can reach, and what can happen if they don't get reached is probably even more critical. To maybe demonstrate the cost effectiveness, look at different notification systems, or, for me, it's not always about the price, it's about who does best. That's, why we have Everbridge, because we think that, it's the way to go. Engaging stakeholders, getting all your municipalities involved, and just, really getting buy-in. So when you present it, you said, well, you can say, well, hey, I've had 5 out of my 6, municipalities think this is a great idea. And just, you have to make sure you have that community involvement and that partnership involvement, because it's going to be important that your Board of County Commissioners are looking at this, your county administration, and they ask who else supports this, if it's a county-wide program. And conduct a needs assessment. Do you really, what kind of system do you need? What kind of notification system do you need? Depending on your population, your demographics, there's so much to consider. But just, collaborate with the other jurisdictions and see what they're doing. And to me, that always works for me. Well, so, this county to the south and this county to the north are using this, and these are the benefits they see. And we'd like to be consistent in the way we message. And, Palm Beach County and St. Lucie County are doing the same things we are. We're in the middle, and, so just really selling the benefit, and maybe just like some success stories that you might have had from the benefit of notification or early notification, or just, advising the community on what they need to do, and, maybe getting some positive feedback from the community.
Yeah, and something that I know that you guys do, and you touched on a little bit, Sally, earlier, but you guys obviously use Alert Martin to notify your public of emergencies, both, localized flooding to countywide evacuations, all of that stuff, everything in between. But you also use it daily for your internal notifications. And I think that's something that a lot of county commissioners tend to miss. It's if you haven't had an emergency, knock on wood here, in a while, they tend to lose sight of the value of a public notification system. But where I've seen a lot of jurisdictions kind of be able to hold on and prove the value is, yeah, we're using this for public notifications, but we're also using it to notify internally about EOC activations, trainings, shift changes, all of those kind of things where it's we're able to kind of show the value that way too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we had a good example during the Hurricane Nicole, when the weather kind of changed, and instead of our night shift coming in, bringing 100 people into our EOC at 7 p.m. when the weather wasn't going to be favorable, we sent out a quick notification, the Bravo shift needs to come in at 3. Just something that went out to everybody, quick, and not having to call everybody in. Just that's how we do notifications. Report to the EOC or report to your shelter, or just tons of information. That's how we feed our employees, all of it. So very beneficial.
Absolutely. And David, I know you were a former Everbridge user, moved to a jurisdiction, and now you're kind of coming back over to Everbridge. What was, when you were talking to your leadership, how did you say, we want Everbridge? This is kind of how we want to go, or a notification system in general, but how did you kind of propose that?
Well, you mentioned the fact when I was in Gainesville, that was back when the state of Florida initiated Alert Florida and then passed it to all the counties and then opened it up to municipalities. And even then it was kind of a very clear-cut decision on my part when I said, okay, I'm going to push for us to bring Everbridge to the municipal level, because it gave us all the great features that are embedded in there, getting that message out to our staff, the polling feature, being able to say, are you available for that spontaneous event? But in a hurricane, it's okay, like you mentioned, bringing staff in early, holding them off, maybe coming in a little bit later, knowing, with our community, if they're going to if they're planning on evacuating. You mentioned, Sally, your special needs, access functional needs group, or 300 or 400. Ours is about 950 right now. So we have a very large group, and when we start talking about staff making that contact with them before the storm to make sure that their pre-storm plans are still in place, or there's been a change, the ability to poll those folks is going to help us tremendously in the fact that it'll save staff time. I can use staff doing something else. We all wish we had more staff, but unfortunately, that's not always the case. And I came from, in Florida, I was a emergency management program of 1, working with across multiple departments. But the buy-in was there because the department heads recognized that importance, and I brought that experience and those reasonings up here. So when I moved to North Carolina, our current system, is struggling. So I said, we need to reevaluate, and then we got buy-in by bringing that committee together to evaluate different platforms, and by far, hands down, it came back to Everbridge on what Everbridge brought us. So and they knew they had somebody not necessarily pushing for it, but supporting the vision there, to bring Everbridge to Brunswick County, and the ability to plug it in areas that have already been mentioned. But there's so much capacity with the program that we can plug in areas they've never thought about here to better our community. And we just found it was a better product for us.
And I know we have some questions from the attendees, but one other thing that I wanted to touch on when we are talking about reasons to, you know, bring back the value to our leadership. You guys both mentioned deploying. I deployed during Hurricane Michael within the state. I think it is so important to have like a statewide system, because when I deployed over to Calhoun County, they were also an emergency management team of one. I was immediately able to jump into their system. I said, just give me a login. And then I was able to send out notifications on their behalf because it's a system that I could, you know, log in and use wherever, because it's the same system. So I think, you know, Sally, you mentioned like county to our north, county to the south, like when you're helping each other, you're able to immediately see, you know, I can help you, just send a notification on your behalf because we have the same system.
Right.
I think that that's a lot of value.
Absolutely.
Hannah, do we have questions?
Yes, we do have some questions. And then if anybody else wants to ask any, we can certainly take some more. So we'll start off with, is there any one thing that stands out as a learning moment from a major storm in the last few years? So a moment where you said, we have to do this differently next year.
For me, it definitely is recovery. Just from being at Hurricane Ian, I came back with, you know, a completely new recovery plan and housing and you know, where do you put 10,000 FEMA trailers? You know, just, you know, there was just so much in recovery. I've actually already hired a recovery contractor and just went through so many processes that I've seen in Lee County that I took back with me. Sometimes if you're a smaller county, you think maybe you don't need as much as a big county, but it doesn't really matter in emergency management whether you have 10 residents or, you know, 1 million residents, or you do the same activities. I think when we started this conversation, I told David we're probably going to have many similar answers because it's what we do in emergency management, you know. But definitely recovery. That was definitely something I brought back that I've enhanced a lot in this county. So hopefully I don't ever have to see that much recovery come to fruition here, but I'm definitely going to be ready for it.
And I think on our end, we had what was left at Ian showed up on our back doorstep, or our front doorstep actually, after it left Florida last year. Obviously not to the level of, you know, damage and severity that Florida experienced, but we in our neck of the woods here, we're challenged with sheltering. And even when we start talking about smaller events, that's a huge concern with us. I mean, our shelter capacity is very limited, so we're having to think outside the box. The state of North Carolina is undergoing a complete rewrite of their all hazard shelter plan and tiering that out into 3 different tiers. And it's been an adventure, bringing a lot of experience coming in from Florida, which has a very robust shelter program, and sharing those ideas and trying to implement pieces of that to help us, you know, improve our shelter plan. And I think where it really comes down to, and like Sally said, you know, we're all faced with similar challenges, and a lot of our fixes and our gap measures come from people that experience those same issues. And that was, you know, kind of what I did here. I brought in some experience to help bridge some gaps that we had, but you know, those experiences up here have been a little bit different for me compared to back in Florida. And so you're still trying to learn culture here, how they do business. You know, the state plans are evolving because of the challenges that are here in the eastern North Carolina. So it's important to make sure that we're communicating across not just our our neighbors north and south county wise. Like in our case, if I go south, I'm in South Carolina. And then, but I'm reaching back to, longtime friends and fellow emergency managers in Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, all over the country, in some cases, just to kind of think outside the box. What works somewhere else may actually work in your neighborhood. So just keep your eyes open, ears open, and more importantly, your mind, because to be able to absorb it all.
Awesome. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
As you were talking about that, I was just thinking that just today we started building our Everbridge group for our faith-based and nonprofit agencies, because we do a lot of host sheltering. Speaking of sheltering, not just risk sheltering during hurricanes, but what's going to happen if your home's gone and you need to have recovery sheltering. We're going to close schools as quick as we can, or open the schools as quick as we can and try to have people, some type of temporary housing. So we just contacted all of our, people that have MOUs with us and started loading them into Everbridge. So now we can just do one notification to them. This is what we need. We have 500 displaced families. Who can take what, and we can do that with a poll or, any other type of something that Everbridge has available to us. So we just kind of thought that was going to be a good idea to get that message out really quick, that we need, host temporary housing like right away.
Yeah, definitely. So as you set up things like that, and obviously you communicate sheltering via, you communicate your shelter locations via your alerting platform? Is it for people who are just the people who are opted in to receive those alerts? How does that work as far as communication?
Right now we just do special needs, so we're only alerting the people that are on our special needs registry, or if they've opted in. We don't usually give our shelter locations over Everbridge. Usually they're posted on our websites, because they're not assigned to a shelter, so we can't go individually and say, you're closest to this shelter. We don't ever know what shelters we're going to open first. But definitely for the special needs shelter, we notify all of our clients that are signed up for special needs sheltering.
Okay. Well, that kind of leads into, we also got a question around getting people to opt into alerts and sign up for keywords. So they just asked if you could share more about getting people to opt in, and just said that they struggle with community buy-in.
I think that, David was talking earlier about really not overwhelming people with notifications. So when you can opt into Everbridge, there's so many selections you can pick, whether you want a day-to-day, thunderstorm, or, a tropical storm, or, there's so many different choices. I think that sometimes it gets overwhelming if you sign up for a day-to-day thunderstorm, because lately we have them every day. So just every day for me, even getting that notification that we're having a storm today, even though earlier I'm like, oh yeah, well now I know it's going to rain outside. But I think, that might get a little overwhelming to people every day. And then sometimes I think maybe they won't listen to the important messages. So I would just say that, maybe don't sign up for the day-to-day thunderstorms, at least make it, opt into something that you really think is important, to you and, to your family. And just because it can get a little overwhelming. And we have a lot of phone calls, and, people say, I've gotten this 10 times, and we'll say, hey, let us take that out for you for a while. And if you want to come back to it, you can. We really have that really good communication with our community about, what they think is important to them. And I don't know, I did agree with David. Sometimes it's just, you get too many notifications, or, just people don't pay attention to the important ones.
Oh yeah, in the summer in Florida, I think we definitely get a little over notified when there's severe weather. But when you're encouraging your residents to sign up, I know you talked about like going on the news and doing a segment on hurricane preparedness. I know you guys are super active on Twitter and Facebook, and you do your community outreach. Is that where you're mostly talking about Alert Martin and what kind of notifications they can receive, and where
yes,
you can
absolutely.
customize your profile?
Yes, and we have our Alert Martin cards, and we make it easy, 888-777, and they're able to go into, if they have a computer, it's easier. For a lot of the older residents, they call us because our number's on the card, and they call us and we do it for them, and we'll talk it through. What do you want to hear? How important is it? In some areas of Martin County, we have severe flooding issues. So it's really important to some people that live in a certain area that, it's going to rain hard today. Some roads, close easy or flood easy. And, I think that's, so depending on where you live and what your demographics, just all of that geographically where you're located, maybe you want to hear those thunderstorms every day and how much it's going to rain and severe weather. So that's really important to, when you're doing some public outreach, just to say, you have the option to be safe and pick, whatever you want to, whatever makes you more resilient and, better prepared.
Yeah,
How are you increasing those opt-ins?
yeah, I think it's important to, when you're engaging the community and trying to convince them to opt in, and you've got to really you become the salesman or salesperson. You kind of take Kate's job and the rest of everybody else, because you got to, to a lot of your community, you got to sell it. And, why is it important? How's it going to benefit the customer? And, when you start mentioning the ability to eliminate the day-to-day things, if you don't want to know that there's a storm, a heavy thunderstorm in the area, because you see those every day, it's nice to be able to uncheck that block or leave it blank and just move to the more critical things, because back to the importance of being precise and on your messaging and making it vitally important to the customer. And then you're selling the ability for those folks to go in, put their home address, put their work address in, so that when we message certain areas of our counties, they may be working in one town, but they live in another, and they want to know that if we're sending a message to their hometown within the county, they're going to get that message as well, so that they know something's going on, so that they can check on their homestead or whatever it may be, check on their parents or kids or so forth. But you got to sell it in the end, and that's the only way you're going to reach some of the folks. But that community engagement piece, you're sharing details. Some people don't want any message to come by email, because or they don't want to see it a wake up phone call in the middle of the night, because we do it. Unfortunately, that's what some people do, but it allows us to cater to the customer individually at that point, and that's very vital to encouraging more people to opt in.
Yeah, I remember doing community outreach, and especially in some of our 65 and older communities or our senior living facilities, I would do my whole hurricane preparedness presentation. I would talk about Alert Brevard and our keyword opt-in, but then I would stay for 30 minutes after and sign people up, because they didn't like to sign up on a computer. They didn't want to text in, all of that kind of stuff. So I was just like, if you want an Alert Brevard profile and want your assistance creating that profile, come see me afterwards. I'll have my computer. And I would just sign them up, because it was, kind of that gap where we need their information, but they don't know how to get on the computer. Right. We kind of filled that gap that way. So there's definitely some, depending on your demographics, some unique ways that you can get that that opt-in rate up. I know in my community, we have a city that they only get trash pickup once a week. It used to be twice a week. Now it's once a week. So it's a big deal when that trash day changes. So they have a subscription for trash updates. So when they're signing up for emergency alerts, they have the option to say, I also want trash updates. So when they're talking to their community, they say, hey, you want trash updates? Go sign up on Everbridge. So at the same time, we're getting emergency opt-ins, but they're also getting their trash updates. So it was an important piece, important to that community. So we're filling that gap, but we're also able to notify them when there's a tornado warning or a wildfire or whatever.
Well, I think we have time for one, maybe two more. So I will move on to, have you ever experienced technical issues with your platform during a storm? And were you able to get support on that?
I've never.
I didn't. I haven't. We've always been up and running. Back in Florida, we were up and running. Here, we're up and running with our current. We don't expect that to change when we complete the transition, but it would. I think it would seriously impact our ability to communicate in that quick, rapid, messaging platform outside of just getting messaging out on social media. But many of our population aren't on social media. They don't venture onto Facebook. They don't use Twitter, whatever it may be. But so this is, our mass notification system, a lot of times in the trenches during the heat of battle or during that disaster, if we were to lose Everbridge, we're gonna be or lose our mass notification rather, we're gonna be scrambling.
Yeah, I've never had a problem. Never needed technical assistance unless it was something I suddenly needed to add on to Everbridge and didn't know how to do. Then, we just call Kate and she fixes it for us. So, maybe I just, suddenly was like, I need to add every nursing home. I need to make sure that, I'm going to take a poll that they all have their generators running and there's no problems, and just to follow up and, make sure everybody's okay, kind of like a community check. And maybe I didn't know how to do that at the time. So that wasn't a technical difficulty on Everbridge's part. It was my part. So it's
I will say, that is the benefit of having a full-time technical account manager is, during Hurricane Ian, during Hurricane Nicole, having that person, and I'm that person for Florida. So during hurricanes, I'm certainly pretty busy, but it's like having that technical resource where you're not calling a 1-800 number, you're calling someone that you've worked with, in blue skies, in preparation for your hurricane season. You're calling them, you have that relationship. They know what you need without you having to give, 10 steps and a whole background and everything. When your hair's on fire, you're able to say, Kate, put these phone numbers into the system. We need to send them this message. And then they're able to kind of go there. Like a technical account manager, if you're unfamiliar with that resource, I'm sure there's information on our website. But a technical account manager, especially during big county impact events, can be really helpful.
Especially if you're not so technical savvy like myself.
Yeah, it definitely helps to have a strong relationship with that, boots on the ground piece, because I haven't necessarily, like I said, I haven't needed the technical support side, but if I ever had a question about the platform, it was, I knew the face and they knew me whenever I called up and said, hey, what can you tell me about this? What do I need to do? And so that was, that's what I did just a couple months ago when we started our endeavor here. I reached out to somebody I knew. So it's very important that way.
Awesome. Well, I think that is all we have time for today. Again, if you have additional questions that you think of after this event or as you watch the recording, you can email me at hannah.meeks, MEEKS, @everbridge.com. And I will also include my email address in the follow-up email. But that is all on time for today. Thank you, everybody, for taking some time to join us, and be on the lookout for that recording. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right.